Check 1, 2. Is this thing on? Okay. We are talking about ethics. Right? Why don't you guys? I'm going to finish up chapter 6, right? We skipped chapter 5. So we're chapter 6, which is ethics and sport management. Then I sort of sprinkle in leadership. And we're talking about today emotional intelligence. Before I get going, Mara asked me a good question about the quiz and the exam coming up next week. And the point I made to her is the content of both the quiz, bless you, the quiz and the exam will be things that you recognize. In other words, I'll never try to trick you. Like, I don't put Easter eggs around. I don't make you go hunt for stuff that we haven't discussed in class, right? There's a lot of material we cover in the chapters, right? There's a lot of material in the chapters that we don't cover. There's a lot of chapter in the slide stuff in the slides that we're not going to cover. Even today, you'll see I'll skip through a few. So my point is, if we haven't talked about it, haven't covered about it, haven't mentioned it, and haven't emphasized it, it will not be on the quiz and it will not be on the exam. So if you're studying and you're seeing something on a slide, or you're seeing something in your notes, or you're seeing something in the book, you know, whatever, and I haven't specifically mentioned it or talked about it, I'm not going to quiz you or test you about it. The quiz is a series of, it's like a game show. I put a question on the slide, you write down your answer. And so there's no multiple choice or anything like that on the quiz. You'll either know it or you won't. And I'll give you hints because I'm nice. But and then the exam is multiple choice, true, false, and about 3 really short answer stuff that you'll have to use your brain on. But anyway, more on that. But I just want to let you know, if you study over the weekend or whatever, just know that don't think you got to study everything that's in the book or every piece of information on the slides, because I won't do that to you. All right. Right. So we talked a lot about values. It's an important system, right? Ethics, of course, is nothing but a systematic study of the values guiding our decision making, right? What pushes us to make a decision on something one way or another. Now, again, we're talking about framing and management. I'm not necessarily talking about how you decide what kind of smartphone you want to buy. That's a different issue. But how we work with each other, how we interact with each other, how behavior is influenced when we interact within each other, is dictated, as we mentioned in our discussion on Wednesday, that our values determine a lot of times who we hang out with, right? Who we congregate with. Our values come from things we talked about, where we grew up, and who our support structure came from, and the culture that we lived in. And all those things come to bear when we get into a classroom like this, or when you guys get it on a team, or when you get into the workplace. So ethics is just determining how all of us guide what we believe, our values guide the decision making we go about in our daily lives in the workplace. So, it reflects on how we believe people should behave and how we want the world to operate. So, and again, this will illustrate a point. I grew up, and again, don't take this wrong, I'm not pushing anything particular, but I'm trying to make a point. I grew up in a Christian household, so I have a Judeo-Christian upbringing, right? And so I know these things, but I believe that what I'm about to ask you is a universal principle. So, does anybody know what the golden rule is? What's the golden rule? Treat others how you would like to be treated, right? You can go about your day every single day when you interact with somebody about treating them the way you would expect and want them to treat you back. That is a great founding principle of how you go about setting the way we interact with people. So what's the platinum rule? Ever heard of that before? The platinum rule? Platinum rule, treat others how they want to be treated. And we as managers have to do both. The easiest one is to think, well, in this situation, how would I want that person to react to me and treat me? And I'll start there. But ultimately, we as managers, to influence the behavior that we need to increase production, all those things, we've got to figure out, how would Natalie want to be treated? I got to treat her how she wants to be treated. That's where it gets difficult, because all of you subtly want to be treated a little different. But in management, because we manage a diversity of people, we've got to figure out a way to treat people and make decisions that are fair across the board. So some base level, I'm talking about sort of universal truths, understanding about how we should treat each other in the workplace. These come about in things like employee handbooks, right? Employee guidelines. And we'll get to that in just a second. But how we as managers, how we go about the process of making the correct, and again, I can't overemphasize this enough, a fair decision. How is it that whatever decision I make as a manager is going to be seen by everybody as whether they agree with it or not, at least fair, right? And it depends on our values and the values of the organization for which we work. And what one person might see as fair, another person might not. This goes back to our values and how we were raised and all kinds of things that go into how we perceive the world. But if we can start with the golden rule and the platinum rule in management and just in life in general, I think that really gets us really to the 50-yard line, to be honest with you, or maybe even farther. 20 on football analogies, right? I mean, you're almost home. If you can just stop in every interaction and go, wait a second, before I say about what I'm about to say and the way I'm about to say it, is that how I would want that person to say this back to me or do to me? No. And then just because I want that doesn't mean they want that too. So now I have to know another layer is, well, how would they want me to treat them in this situation and see if I can do that? I think you guys understand it. So in management, we come up against ethical dilemmas all the time, which is the practical conflicts involving equally compelling values or social obligations, right? These things that maybe on a scale look like they're about equal, but yet we can't go with both. We've got to pick a side, or maybe even 3 things on a scale, or 4 things on a scale. We in management, come up against these dilemmas all the time. So when I talk about some of these commonly held values, what I talked about on Wednesday is sort of baseline universal truths. What is it we can all get on? What another way to say is lowest common denominator, right? Lowest not in terms of value, but lowest in terms of easiest to all agree to. Low-hanging fruit. What can we all agree with? And we went through that when I was on the board over there about, respect and those other things, which we'll talk about more here in a little bit. We as a management, and we inside the office that work together in sport management, we have to articulate all the time. We had a discussion a few sessions back about how we understand how words are important. We'll get into this when we get into communication more. We all hear, everybody agrees, words are important, but actions are more important, right? If we don't back up what we say with what we do, our words are empty. So we have to articulate what those values are, and we have to show through our actions what those values are within the workplace. The decision making requires consideration of how our actions will affect other groups. Now, write this down and put a pin in it because I'm going to get to this in a second. This is very, very important. This might be the most important thing about management right here, okay? So, take a note of that. I'm going to just skip over this really quick because I'm going to do another slide that compares morality to ethics. But morals, as we talked about, are fundamental baseline values that dictate appropriate behavior within a society. Some of these are codified in laws, right? How we believe people should behave within a society, these baseline, commonly held beliefs are what morals are, right? Morality is concerned with the values that guide our behavior. What is our morality that then guides the behavior with how we go about our lives? And again, can we, let's say, okay, here's my morality and my values, right? Here are my values, and just making up numbers, if we could make a list of 20, maybe we would put them side by side and say, we agree on 18 of those. There's 2 we don't, but 18 of those suckers we all agree on. That's kind of your commonly held baseline values that we expect everybody to act within those guidelines, that appropriate behavior within a society. That's morality. And of course that means then, and we'll get into this in another slide, morality for one society is not necessarily the same for another. Right? And all back to what we talked about on Wednesday, where we grew up, how we were raised, where the country we grew up. So here's morals versus ethics. Ethics and morals relate to right and wrong conduct. While they are sometimes interchangeable, they're different, right? Ethics refer to rules provided by an external source. Morality guides us internally. Ethics refer to external sources, codes of conduct in the workplace, codes of conduct in the workplace. That's the biggest one. People who fit within a particular sort of belief system in a religious system, right? There are expectations about those within identify with a religion, what those ethics should be inside that religion. Coaches and other types of managers put in place for everyone to follow. And again, I use sort of guidelines, code of conduct. That's the best way to describe it. But morals, again, refer to an individual's own principles regarding right and wrong. So therefore, sometimes you could see somebody's morals may not line up completely with a workplace's ethics. Maybe they think the workplace's ethics aren't broad enough to cover all their morals, or maybe the other way around. So ideally we need those things to line up. But in the workplace, because again, we manage diverse people with diverse backgrounds, diverse opinions, diverse levels of education, creative, ambitious, we've got to all come to an understanding that these are the codes of conduct we expect in the workplace. And when you do that, you literally write it down. It's a code of conduct. You hand everybody. Typically, when you get hired, you get on board and go, here's the expectations. When you work here, these are the guidelines that we expect you to follow. And if you don't, consequences, X, Y, Z, whatever those things are. Okay? So we as managers run into ethical dilemmas, and we have to have ethical considerations that are basically decisions that affect diverse groups of people within conflicting interests, which I just mentioned. Think about us as sport managers, and we have to, what I would call here, you'll hear me use this word a lot, anybody that sort of connects with an athletic program or a team, we would call a stakeholder. Not a shareholder, but a stakeholder. I've got a stake in how the University of Tulsa soccer team does, right? Who are some stakeholders for the University of Tulsa's women's soccer team? Right? Obviously the players themselves, okay? Who else? The fans might consist of who? Who might the fan base be made up of? Right? We talk about fans, but who's in the fan base of University of Tulsa soccer fan base that have a stake in what happens with the team? Friends and family. That's the first place to start. Widening that out, anybody that loves the University of Tulsa and identifies with Tulsa and wants to see its athletic teams do well, right? You're getting this. These are all stakeholders. I got stake in how well that team does. Other people are outside that aren't stakeholders because they don't care. I don't go to University of Tulsa. I can't stand soccer. I don't know anybody that plays on the team, right? Those aren't stakeholders. But anybody that's got a connection to any sort of group is a stakeholder. If you're the coach or you're an athletic director and you're trying to decide what to do about something, you have to understand that audience, that group of stakeholders that all have an interest of what happens there or will be affected based on the decisions that you make. Sign this player, don't sign that player. Discipline this player, don't discipline that player. Discipline, but discipline this way instead of that way, right? Practice this way instead of that way. Stay in this kind of hotel instead of that hotel. I mean, make them eat really strictly, don't make them eat really strictly. I mean, there's just different things, but every time we make a decision, it affects all those stakeholders. So we have to run up against things all the time that put us in these dilemmas on a daily basis. And so we have to have a decision-making ability, a process in which we try to come up with an outcome that is, again, a decision that is fair, right, to the widest group of stakeholders possible. Systematic process of reasoning. This is where the critical thinking comes in. This is where these skills are important that you guys will understand as you get into the work life after school. We do this a lot, right? SMART, SWOT analysis, SMART analyses, all kinds of different things we do on making decisions of pros and cons. So it's not rocket science here, but we do that. Oh my gosh, here's this dilemma in front of us. Let's weigh the pros and cons of each alternative direction we could go, which is what this next slide sort of talks about, right? We recognize there's an ethical dilemma here that has lots of different outcomes on that scale, and all of them may be equal. We're trying to generate an outcome to make a decision. We've got to come up with a generation of alternatives, things we could do, things we wouldn't want to do. We evaluate those alternatives and we take a few off the table. No, we're not doing it that way. this we can put over here. We might do it this way, right? Let's evaluate. What happens if we do this? Who's affected and how? What happens if we do this? Who's affected and how? If we do it this way, does the fairness expand or contract? You can't win over everybody. You can't please everybody. You just can't. I used to make these things all the time with fans. I mean, one brief example, I worked for a hockey team years ago in Colorado, and we used to do these giveaways just like you do. Hey, first 1,000 fans come to the game, get a cap or whatever. Well, we did a puck, right? Just a good old-fashioned, if anybody knows what a hockey puck's made of, very hard vulcanized rubber. It's a very thick, hard, thick thing, and then when they freeze, they're very, very hard. Well, you don't want to give away pucks to fans on the entry. Why? What if they get mad? What might they do with them? They might throw them at people. So you do an exit giveaway with pucks. And so as people were leaving, we had this sort of pickup station. Well, how did we determine who got one? Well, we still said the first 1,000 people that got to the game would get a puck, but when they came in, you got a coupon, you got a little ticket, and you could redeem that ticket on your exit for one puck. And people lose their dang minds about trying to get a puck that's a piece of rubber with a logo on it. Doesn't mean anything if they think you're not doing it right and doing that process fairly. I ran into this with fans who are trying to line up for a Coca-Cola hat at some post-game party we were having. They were losing their dang minds over thinking that we weren't going about the process fairly about who got a cap and who didn't. So you have to think about all of those kinds of things. So one simple example is okay, do we put the pucks here? Do we give them away entry or exit? How do we make sure somebody gets one? Do we do one or two? Right? If somebody says, I got 2 tickets, now you only get one, you have to think about all this stuff and how many people that would affect. And then try to cover your bases so it's as fair as possible. And you're always going to have people outside that to think, that's not fair. You didn't treat me right. What if we gave away 500 pucks and you were the 501st person that came through the door? So I'm just saying, we have to determine what are alternatives, how do we do something, and then let's make the best ethical decision, again, based on our values, based on the code of conduct we set up within our organization. What's our intention when we make this decision? We actually put the solution into play, and then we see if it worked. So it's similar to kind of what we talked about on our cycle of things. Again, you're always evaluating. And if it didn't, maybe you go back and you start here again. Right? Something happens here, you might have to jump all the way back up to here and go, wait, that didn't work, let's try again. And I think it takes a lot of courage, and in management, you guys will hear this a lot. Sometimes it's okay to admit a mistake. Now that takes a lot of trust, right? We'll talk a lot about trust in this course. But you have to be willing to say, you know what, I messed that up, we're going to do it again. Or I'm sorry, I apologize, I made the wrong decision here. And you have to trust the people that, again, the followers that choose to let you lead them will be okay with that, and things will be succeed. Sometimes it's okay to admit when you're wrong. So anyway, we have to do this all the time, and this is kind of the process we go through. I mean, you could sort of overlay this on any sort of decision-making process. List the pros and cons, what's my alternatives, what's the best outcome, let's make that decision, let's see if it was the best outcome. If it wasn't, we got to start over again. You get it. I love this. You'll need to know this. Josephson Institute of Ethics came up with what we talked about, the 6 pillars of character. Now again, we're in a chapter talking about ethics and leadership and management. And we could do an examination, and maybe the article I'll give you might have something to do with this examination about what we believe the best character traits are in leaders and people that we want to be with and choose to follow, essentially. If I'm going to put myself in the group of followers of that leader, it's because that leader demonstrates the character traits that I most want to see as a leader. And you guys have decided that. You can look right here, you might be ranking them on your own. Which one do you think is the most important and why? Right? You can see how all of these are important, right? In leadership and just in friendship and, again, the way we treat people in a society. All of those are important. But we're talking about leadership here. We're talking about management, okay? What is trustworthy? Everybody will say, oh, yeah, we want to be able to trust our leaders, right? We want to be able to trust each other. What does trust mean? Somebody says, oh, let me define the word trust. What does that mean?
You can rely on them.
Mm-hmm. Reliability. Any other way to put it's perfect, Mar? What else? Is there any other way to put trust? We rely on them, but what we rely on them to do what, Mar? Let me push on you a little bit there. You're not wrong, but think about that one extra step.
We ask, or we trust them with like our information we tell them, or
we trust that they'll come through, right? We trust that they'll live up to our
expectations.
Correct. And that means if they live up to those expectations, we can call them reliable. Now here's what I'm getting at, the kernel of what I'm getting at. What happens when somebody proves to be untrustworthy? What does that imply? What does that mean? They didn't live up to those expectations. They're not reliable. But what does that do to us? When somebody we trust proves to be untrustworthy, what does that do to us?
We lose respect for them.
We lose respect. But the respect is a result of something that, you're right, but something that happens right before that, which is we're hurt. We're injured. Trust is nothing about more than this word here. You'll need to know it. Trust is nothing more than us opening up ourselves for the vulnerability of being hurt. Period. If we trust somebody, that means we're giving you the power to hurt us by betraying that trust, by breaking that trust. That's why it's such a thing that it's such a high standard for us, because nobody wants to be hurt. And there are levels of injury. There are levels of trust, layers to it. But essentially you say, I trust that leader. I trust this process. I trust my friend. I trust my boss. It means that I am opening myself and being vulnerable, that I could be hurt. Because if they betray that trust, if they break that trust, now I'm injured. And that injury leads to, as Maura points out, the result is lack of respect. Maybe I don't respect them. Heck, maybe you don't even like them anymore. Right? You definitely don't trust them anymore. And then we have to build back that trust up. That's why it's a very fragile thing. It's very, very important. In the workplace, if followers cannot trust the leader and the leader cannot trust the follower, the whole system breaks down. But knowing that is that we're a group of people looking at each other and going, here, we are all trusting each other, which means all of us could hurt all of us at any given time when that trust is broken. Right? I need you to do a job and I need you to do it well, and I'm trusting you to do it. And when you don't do it, it hurts the whole thing. My trust in you is broken, and therefore that hurts. We definitely talked about respect. I won't go through that again because I gave you my big speech on that. Gotta respect people in all those 3 or 4 layers. Self-respect, and then those 2 that are given. Anybody want to repeat what they are? What's the first level of respect is what? Anybody remember? What does that imply? Yes, Isabella.
Respect for authority and power structures.
That would be the second one, but yes. What's the first one? What's that?
Right to exist?
Yes.
Okay.
Respect for your right to exist. I respect you as a human being, your right to be here, breathe, take up space, and pursue a life that leads to your happiness. I've got to grant that, right? That respect is given. The second level is you got to respect authority, power structures. What was the other thing I said? Authority, power structures, and then there was another one. But same thing. You got to respect that institutions. You got to respect the institutions within you, what you work. If you don't respect that, then the whole thing breaks down. And the last one is respect for the person when they've earned it. Right? The first 2 are given. The last one I've got to earn. I got to earn your trust. I know respect. I know you respect my right to be here. I know you respect the fact that I'm your professor or your boss or your manager, and you're going to respect the power structures and how we do things around here. But I need to earn your respect as a person. That's the deepest level, right? So we covered that. 6 pillars of character: responsibility. That comes back to, I think, what Maura was talking about. Reliability, responsible, accountability. I love that word. It's a big buzzword in sports. Who's accountable? You got to be accountable. Self-accountability. I talked about when we were going through the syllabus. I'm here to help you learn, but ultimately your grade is determined on you and your own accountability to your own standards and your own expectations and how you manage your own self. Your own self-accountability, right? Fairness, again, I've talked about a lot. A pillar of character is, am I fair? Do I treat people fairly? We covered it, golden rule, platinum rule. And figuring out a way that I act in a way that everybody without a doubt can tell that, hey, I may always agree with that person, but I can guarantee I'm going to be treated fair by them. A huge thing, right? Can you see how all of these things can feed into this? Lack of respect, lack of responsibility, they're not accountable, they don't treat anybody fair. That really means I don't trust you to say what you say you're going to do or do what you say, and therefore all these things break down. That's why they're pillars. Pillar implies it holds up a building, a structure. If we don't build the structure on these pillars, one of them is cracking or broken or not there, we're leaning one way, we're tilted. 2 or 3 of them broken, the whole thing's going to fall down. Caring is the heart of ethics. And citizenship includes civic virtues and duties, which what we believe is our responsibility to our society, to the place in which we live and those fellow residents and where we live. The most important one is this. And here's why. It goes back to the speech I gave you early on in this class, which is, and again, pardon my French, it's your give a shit measure. If you don't care, if you could care less about if you don't care about being a trustworthy person, if you don't care about respecting yourself and others, if you don't care about trying to be accountable and be a responsible person, you don't care whether you treat people fair or not, and you don't care what happens in society, you just are here to take and take and take, you'll never get to these other virtues without the fact that you've got to care about wanting to be that. I've got to care about being a responsible person to the people I love and respect. I got to care about respecting people in this world. I got to care about trying to make sure that I'm trustworthy when people give themselves their vulnerability to me to be trustworthy. I have to respect that, right? Alice respects me. She trusts me. I can't betray that trust. Then all this other stuff breaks down. You got to care. You got to get. In sports, it's very, very hard to get people to care because we need them to take action, right? We're trying to influence their behavior. The people that we manage and also our fan base, our customers. We got to influence your behavior. Go back to the marketing lecture. We got to create demand. We got to create interest. I got to get you to care about what I'm trying to sell you or you're not going to buy it. Care underpins all of this. It's very, very basic. You can say, I want to make an A, but if you don't care about doing the work of making an A, you're probably not going to make an A. You got to want to. I want to be a really good player. I want to lift more weights. I want to start on the team. I care about trying to be a starter. I care about what my grade point average is. And if you care enough about it, you'll put in the work. And when you're working around other people, and you think that I want to be somebody that helps prop up this institution on these pillars, and I want to be all these things, you first have to care about wanting to be all those things first. You get my point. The heart of ethics. Very, very important. Because if I don't care about you, and I don't care about whether you trust me, and I don't care about being responsible to you, and I don't care about being accountable to you, then I won't be. And is that any place, do you think we can get a lot done if we're in a working environment where nobody cares about being trustworthy, respectful, or responsible? Probably not. You guys get it. So EQ. We've got 20 minutes. Hang in there. Emotional intelligence measures a person's ability to perceive, manage, and understand their own emotions and those of others. It's composed of skills like self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. It measures your cognitive ability, and your emotional and social competence is considered a strong predictor of success in life and careers. That's not Professor Neuendorf saying it. That's not the author saying. That's research and science. The higher your EQ, the better chance you have to being happy and successful. Put simply, EQ is the ability to be smarter with your own feelings. And I believe, circling back to a couple slides ago, if you can take a pause and think, again, golden rule, platinum rule, my feelings are taken over here and I'm about to interact with Zach. How do I want this to go? What are the words I need to say? How do I need to say them? What's the meaning I'm trying to get across? Right, Zach, you better listen to me. Like I said before, makes a difference. Now, if I'm like, hey, Zach, I need you to listen to me. Look, right, pay attention, right? See, these things all make a difference. You have to check yourself. You gotta exercise that brain muscle so that you're always acting out of emotions and reacting out of emotions. What's the best measure of having a high EQ? Self-awareness. How do we define self-awareness? How would anybody in here define self-awareness? What does that mean? I know it's listed up here, but what does self-awareness mean? Is it anything different than I just said? Would you put it another way? Yes, sir.
It's just like understanding why you're reacting a certain way and what causes that.
For sure. Origins of why you feel certain ways and why you react in certain ways in certain situations. 100%. How cognizant are you of your feelings and why you're feeling that way? What the triggers are, what the sources are. What's the, again, I have 2 sons with autism. We're looking at triggers all the time. What triggers that behavior? What triggers that meltdown in my son Evan? What's his triggers? It's going to really send him on a loop. We all have them. Autistic people are just on the neurodiversity scale. They're at one end, but we all have our own triggers and loops. So Zach is exactly right. I'll go one extra layer. In management, self-awareness is the understanding of how everything I do and everything I say affects those around me. That's what I want you to know. In management, in leadership, self-awareness is yes. Hey, I got to check my own emotions, right? EQ, I got to check exactly what Zach said. Why do I feel this way? Where's it coming from? And how do I react to it? Why am I feeling that way? Being aware about it and then being able to control and manage your own emotions. And thus, by managing first your own emotions, you have a better chance of influencing the behavior and managing those that you lead. Up and down, good and bad. But emotional intelligence is about recognizing that everything I say and how I say it and everything I do and how I do it affects everybody around me. Therefore, I know that even right now, the way I'm talking and trying to make eye contact and moving up and down and moving my hand gestures and the tone of my voice is me understanding that how I do those things, it affects people in certain ways. And I'm not asking you to identify yourself, but you guys are all different people. You might be thinking in here, because I've had it. I've did a lot of professor evaluations. Man, that guy needs to shut up. Or, I totally disagree with what Professor Neuendorf is saying. Or, I don't agree. Or, that's not how I see things. Or, totally fine. Which means that I'm not having that effect because we're different kinds of people. Or others might be saying, yeah, right on, cool, that makes sense, I love that. But what I'm trying to do is making sure that the meaning that I'm trying to convey to you comes across in the way I want you to digest it. Self-awareness is about understanding about the things I do, things I say, and how I say and do them affect those around me. That's management 101. That's human psychology. That's influencing behavior, blah, 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 connected. That self-awareness, that high emotional intelligence quotient, means that you're more likely to be a more ethical person. You're more likely to be have more integrity toward those 6 pillars. Because, now it's exhausting, don't get me wrong. If you're, we've heard the term empathy and sympathy, and, people will say you have to have a certain amount of both of those things to be a good manager, but it is exhausting. Why is management hard work? It's not because we're out there like doing anything physical. It's because if you care, you're taking on the emotions of everybody else that you manage. You're trying to manage those behaviors and emotions, and you feel that. And that's exhausting. And today you just want to go home and I want to tune out. I want to hear things. Just give me some music. I don't want to talk. I hate the sound of my own voice. Because I'm taking on everything you guys are feeling and thinking right now. And when I've managed sports teams, 50, 100 people deep, because I do care, because I have standards I want to set, it can be very exhausting work. I'm not saying it's not rewarding, but just understand if you care, which is the heart of ethics, heart of management, heart of leadership, it's very taxing. But that's always the only way, to me, the only way it could be. What's more about, if you sort of disagree with everything I just said, you don't care about that, but you care about getting a job and getting paid well because you have ambitions in your life, understand that having a high EQ is a must skill for people who want to hire people. Today's fast-changing world, emotional intelligence isn't a nice to have, it's a must skill because we have to navigate this complexity I keep talking about. Research consistently shows that high EQ is linked to stronger performance, there's that word again, better relationships, and greater well-being. This is not a philosophy class, but it is. What are we all trying to pursue? Our own happiness, our own ultimate well-being for ourselves and those around us, those our loved ones. The research shows the higher you are, the more you rate on the EQ scale, the better chance you have at having greater well-being. Again, that's not me saying it. It's me saying it because the research says it. Believe the research or not, but this is what I'm presenting to you today. Companies hire for emotional intelligence because high EQ employees perform better. There's a word again. Produce. They communicate more effectively. There's that word again. They collaborate with their fellow peers better. And their ability to adapt to change, and change happens all the time in office workplaces. In sports teams, it's a very volatile industry. People get fired, different players come in and out, fans are fickle, the win-loss record affects everything, the economy affects everything. People with high EIQ can deal with change better. Employers know that, especially in the sports world, because they know it's volatile. Therefore, I need people on staff. Again, I talked about people we let through the gates that fit our culture and our system. I'm looking for this. How do you evaluate it? I don't have the answers there. There's lots of ways. But again, when you're eventually managers, you're running your own companies, you're running your own departments, figure out a way to assess your candidates on how high their EQ is. You'll be better for it, okay? Spend some time on it. Spend some resources on it, money. EQ fosters stronger teamwork, better conflict resolution, improved leadership, and more positive workplace culture, ultimately impacting. Bottom line means revenue, profit, possibility of profit. Bottom line, if you're a nonprofit, is we have enough money to do the programs in the community that we need to do. There are scientific connectors between the health of your business and the people on your staff having high EQ. Period. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this because I didn't even highlight it in blue, but the basic of this. So in a workplace, ethics are an external code of conduct, right? Here's how we expect you to behave in the workplace. And so I'm giving you a code of conduct, and it has to be, explains the principles under which an organization or profession operates. Should be very clear and straightforward. Don't make it vague. Here's how we expect you to behave in this situation, with this equipment, with whatever it is. Be very, very clear about what the code of conduct is. I worked for a WNBA team here, as you guys remember, and we hired a guy. I didn't hire him, but somebody hired him. He came in, he was going to be part of the sales staff. We were getting to know him that day. We're walking around. We're going from our offices, that were downtown Oklahoma, downtown Tulsa. We were going over to the BOK Center where the team played. We were going to, show him around, or there was a team meeting or something. We go over there. He's been, granted, he was hired, and this is his first day. And we're walking to the office, and I figured exactly what he said. but it was essentially a racist comment about an African American person on our staff, and naming and all this kind of stuff, and he just was right out with it. He was gone an hour later. Right? Just tolerance. What's your tolerance level? And what did you put in? Hey, we do not tolerate racism or comments in these particular ways and if you do it, you are terminated immediately. Don't be like, hey, we'll think about it, or hey, we'd rather you not be this, that, or the other. Be clear about it. What's your code of conduct? Typically, when you onboard into place, and you guys, again, when you're bosses, you have your own code of conduct, they'll read it and they're supposed to sign it, meaning I understand everything in here and I abide by this code of conduct. And if I don't, if I step outside that code of conduct, I'm also clear what the consequences could be. Whether it's a warning, a disciplinary action, a probation, a fine, or immediate termination, whatever that is, you've got to put it very, very clearly in your code of conduct, okay? Those are the ethics that we expect all of us, the external ethics I'm putting on our organization that we expect everybody to follow. Here's that kind of, just real quick, based on a few overriding principles that he used to deal with a variety of ethical dilemmas. Again, these are big, broad understandings about how we should treat each other in the workplace, codified in the code of ethics. Who do they apply to? Clearly, everybody. If not, state it. I'm a carrot person, I've worked for a lot of bosses, and we talked about sort of the difference between, say, a player's coach and a non-player's coach, and their approaches are different. I've worked for plenty of people that try to motivate by fear. If you don't do this, this will happen to you. If you don't do this, you're going to run more laps. If you don't do this, you're going to get less time. They fire shots across the bow trying to warn you with negativity. And that's effective, and it can be. And some people like to be motivated. Some people, that's the only way you can motivate people. I'm more of a, hey, be this, come on board, pull on the same rope, and this is why that benefits you when you do it. You'll decide sort of the balance there. But clearly, though, sometimes, unfortunately, you have to take disciplinary action. I'm always loath to do it because that means I didn't do a very good job hiring you. If I feel I've got to babysit you, like I always talk about, change your diapers, treat you like a kid when I thought you were an adult when I hired you, and you could be self-accountable and responsible and do what I ask because you're a pro, and now I can't, now I have to discipline you, ugh. I'd rather you just go and let me find somebody else in here that I don't have to do that. I got too much other stuff on my plate to deal with your pettiness, to deal with your immaturity, to deal with your lack of understanding of why these things are in place in this office. I don't got time for it. Shame on me for letting you through my gates. My opinion. But there's been plenty of people that have gotten through my gates. And sometimes you do have to take disciplinary action. I've had to do it. Loath that I am to do so. You have to sometimes. And again, I have to be self-aware enough to know that what works for you is not going to work for you. You might be motivated by fear, where that people, I've been in bosses that have threatened me with, if you don't do this, X, Y, Z, you know what that does to my motivation? I'm like, I'm looking for a job right now. That doesn't work for me. That crap does not work for me. You don't threaten me. I'm here working my butt off, bringing my, it doesn't mean I'm always good every day. It doesn't mean I don't make mistakes. But every day I'm bringing it, and you don't recognize that, the kind of stuff I'm dealing for this, and all of a sudden this one thing happens, and you're going to come in here saying, if you don't do it this way, you're out of here. Guess what? I'm out of here already. That don't work for me. But it works for others. So we as managers have to recognize what works, right? Sometimes hard discipline works for others, and it doesn't for other people, is what I'm getting at. I won't spend too much on this, but because we got 6 minutes. But in the workplace, when we're talking about ethical considerations, this is dangerous, although true. In other words, even your code of ethics, even though it's codified in your code of ethics, we understand that, let's say over time, a year, 2 years, 5 years, because societies and morals change in their society, things that happen within your office need to change too. So it's a living, breathing thing. It's an organic process. But we have to understand sometimes that what's right for one may not be right for somebody else, and vice versa. This is where I got back before. What are our absolute truths? What are the things that there's zero compromise on? Like, and you'll decide. For me, it's things like racism and bigotry and misogyny and You know, whatever else I'm going to say. These are absolutes. There's no moral relatives in here from this office. If there is, and you think there is, go find one somewhere else, but this ain't the place for you. Here's our absolutes here. Other things are a little more nebulous. I recognize that. And then there are different things that guide non-commercial moral rules, what dictates what we do and how we conduct our business in the marketplace, as opposed to what we may expect in the workplace, within our own walls. We have this concept of loyalty. And again, this is going to sound super negative, and I'll say it again. Corporations and the groups you work for will obviously always want you to be loyal to them. They're paranoid. They don't trust you. They expect loyalty because they don't trust you. They're afraid of being vulnerable to being hurt. I need your loyalty. Sign this. Tell me you're loyal because I don't trust you that you're not going to break my trust and you're going to hurt me. So therefore, I need you to prove to me that you're loyal. But as soon as things change and organizations need to be reorganized and money is tight, guess what they do? Bye. I know I asked you to be loyal, but we're not loyal to you. We're gonna let you go, Kat. Thanks for your loyalty while you're here, but now you're gone. Wait a second. I just was loyal to you. I sacrificed. I took a pay cut. I signed a thing, whatever. I'm loyal to you. And now all of a sudden, just because things change, you're getting rid of me? Corporations have no loyalty to you. They want you to be loyal to them, but they have no loyalty to you. Don't forget that. Rare exceptions, I'm sure there are. The flip side of that would be a corporation says, man, we're going through tough times, but picking on Kat again. Kat, you've been great here. I know I've asked you to do a lot. You've shown me you're a loyal team member, and I'm going to protect you. I'm going to protect all of us. Times are tough. I'm going to be loyal to you because you've given it back to me. How do I express that loyalty? Well, I don't let you go, or I listen to what you have to say, or I bend the rules when I need to because maybe you're going through something at home in your personal life. Whatever it is. It's a give and take thing. I'm just saying that a default position mostly is the companies want you to be loyal to them, but there's no loyalty back. That's my experience, okay? Because as soon as they need to make a change, bye-bye. Thanks for your work. Appreciate your loyalty while you're here. Now go find something else to do. There's a lot of corruption. I'm not going to go in this. We know we can think of unethical and corrupt instances in the sports world. They are. These are part of those dilemmas that we as managers have to deal with. Think about Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, and all the things he's had to deal with, let's say, domestic abuse cases or gambling issues. So they happen in the workplace, and again, ideally, the NFL's code of conduct and what they codify in the rules and bylaws and really the agreement between the players and owners is going to determine a lot of ways what Roger Goodell, in this example, his determination on his decisions, right? So use of performance-enhancing drugs, all the kinds of things that we can think of that we might think are immoral, but also unethical, and they're unethical because they go against the code of conduct of the organization or the governing body. But we have to deal with that stuff all the time, unfortunately, because humans are humans. Humans are humans. Here's some of the things we have to deal with, common ethical issues, right? I just mentioned a couple. Performance-enhancing drugs. I just told you an example. There was a guy that was racist and we let him go on the first day he was on the job. People, unfortunately, because of pressures, give into corruption or bribery, or they're just greedy, they're broken souls, whatever we want to say, whatever the source is of the behavior. There's harassment, abuse of power. These are things that we encounter, unfortunately, not unique to the sports world, but because, again, we're in a sport management class, we understand, and you guys could probably think of specific examples in your head in the sports world when you look at these things. Just know as you as managers will face them. And there may be more on this list we're not even get to. Okay? And that's what that link is. I think you should always be self-examining. We got 1 minute here, guys. Self-examine. Check yourself. Be self-aware. What is the cause of my emotions? Why do I feel this way? Is this a good fit for me? Constantly trying to be a better version of yourself. You're never going to be perfect. But how is it you can be still you and maintain your personal integrity, but be a better version of you? And be a better version of you to people that you work with. Even if you don't like them, you have to respect them and you have to work with them. I've been in plenty of situations where I work with people I didn't like, but I still work with them because we're pros. You just have to put aside that stuff and just work with them. It's our job to get this job done, and so I'm setting aside my differences. But self-examine, okay? A lot of times in situations when things get bad enough, there are HR departments where you can go and make sure you communicate your problems if you're being harassed or if you're being discriminated against, whatever it is, that's what these are for. And again, in code of conduct, it will say, if this happens, here's the things you can do to take action. But the point of this whole slide is communicate to decrease in corruption and possible ethical lapses in ethics. Communicate, and typically there's a set department where you can do that communication in a formal way. That's an HR department. Okay? We made it. Thanks for sticking around. Appreciate you guys being here. I'll try to post some things and send you guys some emails as we get close to Monday, all right? Thank you guys. Have a good weekend.